Hello. Today we're going to talk about shareholders agreements and why you should have one. So when you're starting your business, it's all exciting and it's all frantic and the energy levels are really high and you're all rushing around trying to get the business started. And what we want to talk about today is take a breath, take a step back. What are some of the important things you need to do? And one of those that we believe is a shareholders agreement. So we're going to talk about what is a shareholders agreement, we're going to talk about why you should have one and when you should get one.
So, as Neil said, in terms of when you get started in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of energy around, and quite rightly so. You're excited about getting going, and thinking of like shareholders agreements and why you should have them aren't things that you think about initially. So in terms of looking at why you should have them, there are probably the main reasons would be, as in, you should think about every business relationship that you're going into, as in how you want it to end. In terms of, I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's an important thing for you to think about to begin with. So in terms of why you've got it, so basically everyone knows where they stand from day one. Everybody is on the same page. Everybody's driving in the right direction. You'll be surprised how often when things aren't talked about and questions aren't asked that you have to ask when you're coming out with a shareholders agreement, that different people's attitudes to the business just get flushed out. Number two, disputes, problems, they are going to happen. If there are more than one person involved in the business, it just is a natural best will in the world. There's going to be problems and disputes. You want mechanisms and how you're going to deal with that. And as in terms of business change and things like that, what changes in the future, business changes, markets change, you want to have mechanisms to change the business as well. And shareholders agreements are a way to allow you to do that. And also in terms of it's a private document between yourselves. Nobody needs to know about it. And in terms of that, can be a helpful thing as it is. In terms of, Neil will talk a bit in terms of what a shareholders agreement is, and without knowing it, you've got one when you set up your company, but having one that's private for a lot of people, just to be able to talk through some of the difficult things, is an important thing.
Yeah, and I think, as we said, it's when you're starting out and you're optimistic that your business is going to be successful and everything's going to work out really well and things. And unfortunately, life isn't always like that. But that means that's the time.
We're not trying to kill the optimism.
No, definitely not.
But
definitely
there
not.
is reality.
The reality is that there will be bumps in the road, and I think a shareholders agreement, as we said, it's an agreement between the shareholders about how they want certain things to pan out when circumstances arise, specific situations. Whilst you're all optimistic and friendly, now's the time to agree those things, and we'll come on to some of that. But I think the other part of the shareholders agreement is making sure that everyone is very clear about what their role is, what is expected of them, and why it's important to agree all that in advance.
And one of the things I didn't realise when we got started, from the moment you form your company, with Companies House in the UK, you have a shareholders agreement straight away. It's something I didn't probably appreciate. I should have done. There's no doubt about it. But your articles of association are technically a shareholders agreement which binds the company from day one.
Absolutely, and I think that's the shareholders agreement is about how the company is going to be governed and how you're going to treat one another and how you're going to behave with each other. And yes, the Articles of Association is effectively a publicly available shareholders agreement. And some people may redraft and create a bespoke set of articles and that be their shareholders agreement. But as Graham said, many people don't want those agreements to be publicly available. Most people probably don't want them, so why does anyone do it? There is a small admin advantage of having articles, is that if somebody owns shares in the company, they are bound by those articles. If you have a separate shareholders agreement, then the shareholders have to sign up to it, and if a new shareholder comes in, then they have to sign up to the shareholders agreement completely independently of getting the shares. So there can be reasons why you would have it public, but as Graham said, the vast majority of people would have a private arrangement between the shareholders about how they're going to treat each other, and it's mainly around there are some standard sort of things that might be included, but it's more around.
But it varies depending what the business is and who's involved.
Absolutely, and I think it's about envisaging scenarios and then saying, if that happened, how do I want to be treated? How do I want to treat other people? And so therefore, the makeup of the shareholders will determine what scenarios might happen. So if three mates set up in business together, owning it equally, you'd have a different set of, well, what could cause problems in the future? One of us wants to leave and sell up, or one of us wants to start another business that's not even competing with this business, or one of us, God forbid, dies. What happens to the shares? What happens? And that's a good example. If you're the one, if you think, right, if I died, what do I want to happen to my shares? You'll have a set of views to do with your dependents and whatever. If he dies, what do I want to happen to who am I going to be in business with? So whilst you're optimistic and friendly, now's the time to think, well, if that happened, how should we treat one another, or in that case the estate?
And in terms of what a shareholders agreement is in terms of it's a legal contract between the shareholders and owners. Specifically what's in each one will differ according to who's in the business or whatever, and this video is not about in terms of technically what is in the shareholders agreement. Right. What we want to talk about is in terms of what are the questions you need to be asking with the shareholders when you get started. So in terms of around things of exactly Neil said, what happens if someone wants to leave, in terms of what the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved. What are those? What, as I say, God forbid someone dies or is incapacitated. These are not pleasant questions in terms of, don't feel like something you won't actually want to talk about, but they are so important in terms of, for different businesses. I mean, the example of mine, I remember years ago, we were starting up something with a couple of mates of mine in terms of we'd got going, and then we're sitting in the park and one of them said he'd taken a job. And there's like the other two of us went, oh, you're right, okay. And it's just stuff like that in terms of if we'd had this conversation before we'd started, as in we'd have found out as in he didn't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur in terms of he wanted to he was interested in it, but he wanted to have a safer regular income and day job. And as I say, we were lucky in terms of we were friends and worked out, but in terms of there are plenty of examples where that's not the case.
And I think, as we said, it depends on the makeup of the shareholders. If you're taking an investment and you've got, someone's coming in and putting a load of money into the company, they may think that they have all the power and they will want certain things in the shareholders agreement that are not acceptable to the others and whatever. So it's agreeing all those things. And I think the other key thing about a shareholders agreement is it is almost the doomsday, not the doomsday scenario, but it's the backstop. So we say now, well, if something happened, if I died, I want my wife to get the shares, or no, I don't, I want you guys to buy it and she gets money, or whatever it is, whatever I think is fair, and we all agree that, then that's fine. But whenever that event actually happens, you can still have a discussion and come up with something else that everyone thinks is fair and reasonable and everyone's happy with. But the shareholders agreement is there if you can't actually agree now what's going to happen. And therefore you can say, well, actually, we've got this backstop. We're not going to get deadlocked. We're not going to get to the situation of having to have, there may be legal implications, but you're not going to have a long legal battle that's going to cripple the company or whatever, because you all know we've got this backstop. And if we can't agree something, it's going to be done like this. And that in itself can encourage people to actually agree something.
Yeah, and you never think it's going to happen to you. You never think we're all mates, we're all pals, etc. Everyone's on the same page, etc. You'll be surprised, and not in a bad way, just in terms of it forces you by asking these questions. It forces everyone to articulate what they want to get out in the business. And there's nothing wrong with certain owners or certain shareholders going, actually, that's not what I want. I want something different. And in terms of you be able to deal with it. In terms of I talk about, you'll be able to, but it's guarantee. If you just think a handshake is going to be enough, in terms of it's okay, we'll sort it out later down the line. You might be right, but I'm not sure it's a risk worth taking. You get your chance to write your own company insurance policy.
Yeah.
From
Well,
what you would want to take that chance.
The example you just gave, I've seen that, 3 people, and everyone thinks, well, because effectively the company is a partnership, we're in it together, we're all going to work hard, and we're all going to share the rewards. And then one person says, actually, I'm going to go and get another job. He may well be sitting there thinking, well, the ownership of the company is completely separate to whether I work in the company or not. So no, of course I'm going to keep my shares. Whereas actually, when you started out, everyone thought it was equal effort, equal reward. That's why we own it a third each. And you'd be stuffed, really. You wouldn't be able to. If someone's got 33% of the company, you can't force them out under the company's law. They'll just say, I own a third of it. You two must carry on working flat out to think, and I'll get a third of the dividends. Yeah. There's all sorts of ramifications of that. You'll never pay dividends. You'll do it. But if you fall out, it will just be an administrative nightmare. He thinks he's totally right that, well, the ownership is separate to working in it. The other two think they're right that, of course, you can't own the shares if you're not working in the business. Whereas actually on day one, that would have been a good example, I think, where everyone would have said, yeah, if you want to leave, you've got to give up your shares. Yeah. That's
things change. I don't think there's anything, and that's the thing, when it is day one and you're having these questions, and I think people hear like shareholders agreement, founders agreement, they're like, oh, geez, this is legal stuff or whatever. It is just at its basic level, what we're trying to encourage you to do here is just ask each other the basic questions. And in terms of, we'll throw them up just now. Now you'll see them at the side of the screen now. And just go through these questions, make sure you talk about them in terms of, they're not always going to be easy in terms of, and you'll feel like, James, I don't want to be talking about this in terms of if one of us is not here or whatever, or that in terms of, but the important thing is to go through the checklist or whatever. You'll be amazed in terms of positive stuff it brings out as well, in terms of, if you answer all those questions and think you're all on the same page, James, that's a big boost. And in terms of energy wise, which is the critical thing when you're starting a business, if there's a lot of energy there and you know you're all on the same page, you know if things don't work out, we've got a way to deal with it, that's a boost in terms. It's not always a negative thing in terms of...
Often I'd say to people, you're going to create this shareholders agreement, you're going to stick it in a drawer, and you actually hope you'll never look at it again. Because if you get that shareholders agreement out, it's because there's a conflict. Because someone did want to leave or someone wanted to do something and the shareholders couldn't agree. So when you can't agree, it's at that point you say, right, what does the shareholders agreement say is the way we're going to resolve this? So to some extent, it is you hope to never have it. And unfortunately, that's why a lot of people don't deal with it early on in the business. Oh, we're all mates, it'll be fine. Why are we going to spend money getting a shareholders agreement? But I say it doesn't need to be that costly an exercise. It is a matter of being well prepared about the issues that or the scenarios that you could see coming up that would cause issues, agreeing how to resolve it, and then that way you'll be briefing whoever's drafting the agreement really clearly, and it'll be a quick and easy thing to do. But as I say, a lot of people put it off. Well, that money could be better used on marketing and this, that, and the other, and so they put it off. And then,
which is true. It's a hard thing of, am I going to spend my money on writing up a legal document, or are we going to spend it on trying to get more sales in terms of? As you said,
as an insurance policy, it'd be if you fall out, it would be,
and you get to write it yourself. But I don't know another insurance policy where you can get to write it yourself. So, and in terms of the final point of when to put it together, I think it's as early as possible. And
they're not set in stone. They're not forever. So I remember coming across a little piece of software called Back of a Napkin, and it was for like the three of you. You're in the pub, and you've come up with this business idea, and the thing was, what are the 5 things that would happen? Like, if in fact you don't get the business off the ground, who owns the idea? Will there be a dispute later on? So I think even at that stage, you could have some form of agreement between you, if it's there, when you've actually started the business. Again, some agreement about how much time and effort people are going to put in, what responsibilities they have, all that sort of thing. If you take in investment, you'll have a new shareholders agreement, because the investors will want to impose, almost certainly impose some certain restrictions or controls that they want. And so the shareholders agreement isn't always a one-off thing. It will depend on circumstances, in the same way as people write a will. It doesn't necessarily mean they only have one will throughout their whole life. And it's a similar sort of thing. What do you want to happen in your company? What do you want to happen after you've gone?
And don't think of it as a legal thing, a legal contract. Think of it just basically as an owner's discussion to start. Just treat it like that. Run through the questions that we've put there. Just treat it like an owner's discussion, like anything else. You're talking about the marketing plan, different parts of the business. It's just another owner's discussion. Approach it like that, and you'll find it much more straightforward an exercise to go through. But try not put it off. Try not put it off.
As you said, if you'd have had those conversations with your mate, you'd have. It wouldn't have been a judgment thing. He'd have, well, no, I never expected to work in it full time forever. I thought you guys knew that. Well, you didn't know it because you didn't have an upfront conversation about it. It's those sorts of things. So it's having, I say, open communication avoids confusion.
Was a surprise. So thanks. I hope you found that useful. We've got lots of other videos with hints and tips and guidance on how to get your business started and established. Click on the subscribe, give us some comments, and we'll catch you in the next video.